Welcome to the Project Learn Microlearning focused on implementation. The previous Project Learn Microlearnings have focused on an overview of the program and each of the key components. But now I want to ask you to take a moment to think about what you need in order to implement Project Learn in your club. From a big picture perspective, implementation of Project Learn is all about youth-centered learning, of ensuring that young people with their unique strengths, needs, interests, and identities are at the center of an implementation plan, and that flexible learning opportunities and supports are designed around those young people. This is our approach to youth-centered learning, and of course it includes leading with connection, ensuring that we're supporting young people's social and emotional well-being, offering a spectrum of enrichment and support, which includes that homework help and tutoring, and also those opportunities to explore something new, relevant and responsive high-yield learning activities, reciprocal partnership and engagement with families and caregivers, partnership with schools, and the support of youth advocacy, in which clubs get to amplify the things that young people most care about and support them in learning more about those things that they're passionate about. The nuts and bolts of implementing Project Learn can fit really well into a continuous quality improvement cycle, because implementing Project Learn isn't just a one-time effort. You'll want to assess, plan, improve, and then assess again, and make sure that you're continuing to iterate based on what your young people want and need. And so we'll walk through each of these phases of the continuous quality improvement cycle. And I'll specifically mention some of the resources that can support you in implementation. So assessing is all about gathering usable data. Of course, that's going to include youth data. So one way to start assessing youth data is to look at your NYOI, the National Youth Outcomes Initiative, academic success data, which you can access through My Data to get a sense of how your youth are answering questions about academic success. That'll be a good way to get a sense of young people's strengths and needs and interests. You can also learn more just by asking young people questions, whether that's through a focus group or a survey or a pulse check or any other creative way to learn more about what young people are interested in, what they enjoy learning in the club, what motivates them, what kind of academic support they need, and how they would recommend that you collaborate with their families and caregivers and schools. Another great way to get youth data that informs Project Learn is through a school. So a formal data sharing agreement with a school would allow you to get access to some academic data so that you could make even more rigorous decisions about young people's strengths and needs academically. In addition to youth data, you can assess family and caregiver perceptions and interests and needs. So you can ask families about the kind of homework help and tutoring supports they want the club to provide. Of course, you can ask their preferred contact method and their hopes for engagement with the club, and ask them to provide some insight into their young people as learners. One last call out in the assess category is the value of doing some community asset mapping. This is just an intentional practice of gathering your staff and identifying or mapping the various assets in your community that might be able to support Project Learn in your club. This is an opportunity to think about potential sources of tutors, whether you're aware of a work-study program at a nearby college or a high school that has community service hours, or other organizations that might be interested in tutoring. An opportunity to think about field trips and ways to extend learning beyond your club walls, to think about some potential shared resources, whether that's nearby libraries or organizations that might be willing to share some of the learning resources or spaces they have. a source of guest teachers or presenters who can come in and share more about their career or their field, potential partners and funders as well. And then schools, of course, can be an asset and a partner for Project Learn. You can also consider other youth serving organizations that you might partner with in your efforts. So those are all some suggestions for how you could assess as part of your implementation of Project Learn. The next category is planning. So a few planning resources that I'll call out. One is the Program Basics Planner, which is a tool that's designed specifically to support program planning. So you could certainly use this for your annual planning, seasonal planning, session planning, and there are lots of resources linked here, particularly in the far right column in that Back to Club section. You'll find a link to book a consultation. Consults are a great resource for planning and for continuous quality improvement. One specific consultation that you can book is related to education and school partnerships. You can request Project Learn specific information, and at whatever date and time works best for you, you'll get to talk with someone in our youth development department about Project Learn in your club. So that's an opportunity to get really tailored one-on-one advice. Another planning resource has to do with funding. So one thing that you might need in order to implement Project Learn in the way that you want to is some funding to support the work. So the Education Funding Toolkit is a suite of resources that's just designed to help you raise funds for academic success. What you'll find on this page is an assessment that you could use to kind of get you started and figure out what some of those inputs might be into your template of a funding proposal. And then there's sort of a Swiss cheese education funding proposal where you can add some information specifically about your club, but use some of the national data and some of the national trends to pitch a potential funder to support academic success in your club. And there's also a pitch deck that you could use if you were in a funding meeting and wanted to walk someone through a slide deck. And that just includes some of the data relevant to academic success for boys and girls clubs. Lastly, part of your planning is going to have to do with program planning. And so I've mentioned that you can find a lot of programmatic resources and planning resources on the bgca.net page for Project Learn. Also, lots of great high-yield learning activities and other programmatic tools on myfuture.net. And the Youth Development Resource Catalog is designed to help you choose the programs and high-yield learning activities that you would want to implement as part of your Project Learn strategy. Finally, in the improvement category, there are lots of great trainings that you could use to improve the way that your club offers Project Learn. On Spallett Leadership University in the School of Youth Development, there's a whole category of trainings for academic success. And some of those are designed to be in-person trainings where you would need to wait for a training event, and others are designed to be on-demand digital learning. A few of the trainings that would be specifically recommended in the education learning pathway. And these are organized into foundations, strategies, and then program-specific trainings. In the foundational category, I definitely recommend Ask, Listen, Encourage, Active Learning, Building Community, Youth Voice, Hands-on Learning, High-Yield Activities, and Cultural Responsiveness and Inclusion. Those are great trainings for all youth development professionals to take in the club. In the strategy section, a few that would make sense for Project Learn are Academic Success, Project Learn. For any of your staff that are facilitating STEM as part of the high-yield learning activities in Project Learn, STEM in the club is a great one. For anyone who's working on college and career readiness, the college and career readiness training, the workforce readiness training, and then youth development at every age and stage. Finally, any of the program-specific trainings that are education programs are a great fit here. So those are just a few of them, but when you've decided the programs within Project Learn that you want to offer youth, then you can find a training to support that specific program. If you have any questions about implementation for Project Learn as a whole or about any of these specific categories, please reach out either by booking a consult or using the contact through the Project Learn page. Get in touch with the education team, and we would love to support you in your assessing and planning and improving and implementation of Project Learn. A few reflection questions. Take a moment to think about the resources and tools that were mentioned today, and consider which ones you want to look into or which ones you want to spend a little time on. Also, take a moment to determine who your key collaborators are going to be. Project Learn is a big strategy. It's a holistic approach. It's a club-wide effort. And so you probably want to have a team that's working on implementation. So consider who your team is going to be. And I'll mention that could, of course, include staff, volunteers, caregivers, someone from a local school. Youth could be involved in the implementation of Project Learn. So your team could involve lots of different stakeholders. A few recommended next steps for you, things to try. One is just to take a moment while this is still fresh in your head to write down your next steps. Consider your next steps for assessing what kind of data you're going to collect to inform your implementation of planning, what kind of planning tools and resources you're going to look into, whether that's choosing some programs, seeking funding with the funding toolkit, or working through the Program Basics Planner. And then finally, please book a consult if you'd like to ask any follow-up questions or get some targeted one-on-one support for implementing Project Learn.